Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're very excited to have Abba Shapiro here to go over new features in DxO PhotoLab 3.2. Abba is a professional portrait and fine art photographer. He is an Adobe and Apple Master trainer, and he's been authoring books, over 24 online classes. He travels throughout the country leading workshops on lighting, shooting, and post-production. He's a regular speaker at international photography and broadcasting conferences. I've had the pleasure of working with Abba for quite a few years now, and we're happy to have him join us here at DxO and to present to you DxO PhotoLab 3.2.
We're breaking it down into 3 key areas. This is a new features in DxO PhotoLab 3.2. These were just released earlier this month. And I just wanted to go over, for those who have been using it, how we've made some improvements. And this is one thing I really do like, the fact that the improvements come up pretty fast and furious, and the engineers over at DxO really are listening to the users. And there were a couple things we added in 3.0 that people felt could be a little better, and they quickly turned around and improved those and responded and made some changes. So that's what we're going to primarily focus on today. However, since I know many of the people listening in are relatively new, I will throw some overall explanations of the interface, squeeze as much as we can into the 1 hour we have for this webinar. So the 3 new areas that we're going to cover are improvements to local adjustments, improving the repair tool, and improving keyword management. Now, if you haven't been using the application that long, and these themselves are foreign or jargon, I will explain them as we step through. But I am breaking this down into 3 sections, and this way you know what's coming next. And I'll try to do each of these in about 10 to 15 minutes. So that way we'll get these 3 areas covered. Throughout the webinar, I realize some of you are on Windows and some of you are on a Mac system. And I have grabbed a couple of screenshots out of the online manual just to show you some of the interface differences, because if you're following along on your computer, you may say, well, he's on a Mac and it's different on my PC. So I do have a couple of screenshots here just to kind of show you that the differences. I want to point out that pretty much if you look back and forth between the Mac and the PC versions of this, they're pretty much exactly the same. The only time they really vary is when the actual operating system doesn't allow them to be exactly the same, the way Windows works or the way the Mac works. So that's usually why things would be a little bit different. But for the most part, things are exactly the same. And the manual does show both the keyboard shortcuts as well as the interface differences between both of these platforms. So I just wanted to point that out. That's one of the things we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to look at is are the improvements to the local adjustments in DxO PhotoLab 3.2. And in 3.0, we added a lot of new functionality. The existing that you can display both an opacity adjustment, and you can invert or reversal any kind of masking you might have done. And we just, said that was great, but there was some requests that people asked for that they've implemented now in 3.2. And if you've been using the application, one of the things that people asked for was, can we easily duplicate any of these adjustments so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and wouldn't it be great to rename them? So we added those features, and I'll show you how to use those features and how the new parts of these features work. And though it's not necessarily new in 3.2, I am going to do a quick revisit of the new HSL, or Hue Saturation and Luminance feature, which allows you to adjust the hue of a specific color, which is very powerful, and that's why I wanted to revisit that. So let's jump over to our PhotoLab 3.0. I have a bunch of images here to work with, and in some cases I have before and after. Now, the interface, by the way, if you're new to this, is very easy to change what's bigger and what's smaller. You'll notice there's little bars on the left and right side. And there's actually two areas that you work with. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, there's the photo library, and this allows you to search through your hard drives to folders to find folders of images that you might want to work with. You can also create projects where you can create basically a virtual folder. So images from different folders can also be brought in there. We have a project for keywording, but I just threw a bunch of images inside of a folder for us to work with. And I've actually processed these because I want you to see the after, and then we'll go through and I'll do some of the developing to this image so you can see how it works and so you can see the new features. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at repairing an image. Now, this image looks pretty good because I've already repaired it. Well, this is the original that came out of the camera. You'll notice, by the way, if I hover over any of these images, it's really cool. If you're into what's called metadata, it gives you all the information that the camera recorded when you took the image. And that's great. And that's great for a couple of reasons, because not only does it remind you like when you took it and the size of the image and which camera you used, but you can search by this. So if you have a large folder, are you looking for, oh, I just want to find my Fuji camera pictures, or I just want to find my Sony camera pictures, I can search by that, or maybe everything I shot at ISO 100. So the fact that we can read all this metadata from the original file is great. So if that pops up, I just want you to know what that is. So I have this image here, and this is our photo library. But when I'm ready to start editing, I can double click on this. I can switch over to customize. There we go. And now I can start editing individual pictures. And for the sake of everything being as big as possible, I'm going to scale this down so you can mostly see the picture and the interface. So there's several things that I find challenging with this picture. It's distracting. I don't like the way that this, he's not a skydiver, a parasailer is there. I have some horrible sensor dust. By the way, good rule of thumb, don't change your lenses at the beach if it's windy. You will get sensor dust and you'll need to fix that. And we're going to do that also. And I just think some of this stuff is distracting. So we're going to take advantage of working with this image, and we're going to show you how I can repair it. And we're also going to show you how I can, just do some adjustments to specific areas. So the first thing we wanted to cover is, local adjustments. How can I make this better? Well, first of all, I do want to compare this to the original image. And you'll notice that if I click on compare, it's in the upper part of the interface, I see there's some distortion that's already being fixed. And so the beautiful thing about when I bring any of my images into PhotoLab 3 is the folks at DxO have taken hundreds of cameras and hundreds of lenses and looked at all those combinations and fixed any kind of distortion that may have been created. So this is really nice. Now I don't have to accept those fixes. I can always turn them off, or I can even enhance them more. But it's just kind of nice to know sometimes what the before and after. I'm going to jump over to another one of these other images that I brought in. That was the original. If you notice that it falls into the black, you don't see a lot of detail in her hair. There's some distortion. And without me even needing to do anything, it's already compensated for the way the lens in the camera sees this image and does a fix and brings out some of that detail. Let's jump back here to the image that we were going to work with initially. And I want to show you how I can do some local adjustments. Now, if you look over, now I've loaded this clip in, just to recall, we're in Customize. There's my metadata on the left. This is all very easy to work with. For those of you who just like quick fixes, I just want to throw that out here. There is a preset editor, so you can, with one click, say, oh, you know what? I want to just do a quick adjustment. and I can double click on that and it processes differently. So sometimes maybe that's where I want to start. That's what I want to do. I can undo anything. It's simply Control Z on Windows or Command Z on a Mac. So there we are back to our original image. And what I want to work with now is some of my local adjustments. So this takes us over to the right side of the interface. And if we look over here on the right side, there's a whole list here. And what's nice about the way we're going to work with this today is there's a little drop down here. I'm sorry, there we go. And you can view things and you can actually see what's new often in the latest version. And so here we have the most 3 recent ones, and I can turn that off. I'm going to go ahead and work with local adjustments. And to do that, I can just click on this disclosure triangle, this revealing triangle, and I'll see this interface here for local adjustments. So what are local adjustments? Basically, when you're working in DxO PhotoLab, you'll see at the bottom, if I close this up again for the what's new, let's see if I can close that, you have these essential tools that you might be familiar with. Fixing white balance, fixing exposure, you know how you want to do that. Smart lighting, you can spotlight information. There's great thing for Clearview Plus, which allows you, if it's foggy outside or if there's haze, it helps you remove that haze. And just as you can see, you can step through and there's lots of different elements that you can work with. And that's globally. So if I went here and I did, say, go into color and turned it on, I could maybe increase the vibrancy or the saturation of this whole image. Well, sometimes I may want to saturate one area, or maybe the sky is too bright. So I want to be able to do local adjustments. So instead of doing this, and by the way, I'm going to reset this back to the default. To reset anything back to the default, just double click right on the slider and it will reset it back to its default position. And let's go back up to the what's new and talk about local adjustments. So here, maybe I want the sky to be a little darker. There's too much, it's a little too bright here. So I can go and click on Local Adjustments tool. And when I do that, it will open that up. Now, you can also find many of the tools that we'll be using and also many ways you can control the interface by looking at the top of the interface. And there's another place that I can turn on local adjustments. So I'm going to mostly work with the right side with the palettes here. Click on that, and you'll notice that my interface has been updated. It tells me that I'm in the local adjustments area. It also comes up with a bunch of keyboard shortcuts to do many of the things that I might want to do with a pull-down menu or right-clicking. So if you're into keyboard shortcuts, this is really valuable. If you find it's distracting, you can close it, but I'm going to leave it up so that way you can see what the keyboard shortcuts are and I may be using them. So that's how the interface changes. But now I'm ready to add an adjustment, okay? And what I want to do is I want to right-click. Now, if you don't have a 2-button mouse, you can hold down the Control key and click the 1-button mouse, or if you're on a touchpad, you can again hold down the modifier key, Control on a PC, and I believe it's Command on a Mac. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, that was Command. So there we are creating it. I'm going to undo that. But when I click here, I want to walk through these different options, because when you're doing a local adjustment, you can do it several ways. You can create a graduated filter. So if I just wanted to work with the sky, I could go up here, choose graduated filter, and simply draw a line. And as you can see, it's gotten dark blue. It's always blue. It's coincidentally, you know, I'm here on a blue background. But when I do that, I get this interface. And this interface has 3 buttons. So this is, again, something to keep in mind. If I click on the top button, it lets me work with different ways of tonality and exposure. And if you hover over any of these bars, you can see I'm affecting different areas. So if I wanted to say, bring down the exposure in the sky, I could do that. Okay, and so now the sky's a little more dramatic, it's a little darker. But I could go through here and fix a lot of different elements, you know, to control the blacks and the whites and the midtones. Maybe I want to bring out, you know, the blacks here to show a little more detail. So I could do that, but right now I just want to point out I'm working with the sky. I could also go into the next one down, and that allows me to control color. So I have vibrancy, I have saturation. I can actually control the color temperature in 2 areas. That helps you color balance a section, as well as to shift my hue. I'm really going to focus just today, because this is not exclusively on talking about working with any of these adjustments, but the difference between vibrancy and saturation is something I like to always emphasize. A saturation slider will equally make everything more or less saturated, no matter how saturated it already is. The vibrancy is considered smart saturation, and what that will do is, as you increase vibrancy, it will only increase the more muted colors first and then get to the more saturated ones. So if I had somebody with a bright red dress, or if I come over here, oops, let me undo that, I just moved my slider. If I have somebody with a bright red dress, I could reduce the vibrancy and only that would be coming down because that's the most saturated. So I like to use vibrancy first for anything, and then I can even control if something is going to be how sharp it is, or blur something. So sometimes I like to blur my skies, so I can do a graduated filter and do that. So I have a lot of control, and it's only affecting whatever's in this gradient here. And I can grab these little sliders and control exactly where that gradient's going to hit and where it's going to start. So I have full control, and this is great. And in this case, I just wanted to soften it a little bit and then perhaps just lower that. If I wanted, I could even change the color here, make it a little more blue, a little less blue. So those are how the controls work if you wanted to make a gradient. And as you can see over here, it says gradient filter. Now, one of the improvements we have is gradient filter doesn't necessarily tell me much, but you know, if I wanted to, I can double click on that and I can say sky gradient. So now I know if I have another gradient, I can easily say that's sky gradient filter, and I'm ready to add another local adjustment. So maybe what I want to do is I want to work with this pool water because I want maybe this to pop a little bit more. So once again, I'm working in my local adjustments. So I can click on that and make it active there. I turned it off. Right click to get that dial. So we did a gradient. There's also control points, and control points are great because I could go over here and say, you know what, I want to bring a little more lighter detail here. So I'm going to choose that as my control point. There it is. And let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what's actually happening here. Move that there. And with a control point, what happens is control points are really cool. And if you've used the Nix software that we also have, you may understand these, but it's taking and it's drawing a big circle, but it's only looking at the areas that are black in here, that have the same hue and luminance factor. So if I start working with the sliders, even though I have this pool and her hand out here, and if I go ahead and work with just my luminance, you can see it's really only affecting just that area. Now, when I let go, it's going to actually resolve that. So you can see very easily with this new filter, I was able to bring out detail. And this is great if you have somebody in a dark shirt and you need to bring out some of that detail that you want. And again, just like we had the controls with our gradient, I have those same controls here. Now it's black, so I wouldn't necessarily deal with color or vibrance, but I might go in and bring a little more detail into this. And that's great. And then what I can do, I just want you to see how a control point works, is I'm going to go down to the bottom here on my interface. There's a little button that says Show Masks. And when I click on that, it shows me in white exactly what's being affected. And if it's black, it's not being affected, whatever's inside this circle. And if it's gray, it might be affected a little bit. And what I can do is I can actually go over here and protect an area. If I click on that, and inside here, I can say, oh yeah, ignore this area right here, or make sure, so I don't even have any of that overlap of, I have detailed control of what's happening with these control points. So now, when I start working with this image, I'm going to turn off Show Masks. It truly is only affecting just this black top here. And this is great because I can do this with the pool here, or with flowers, or just one specific area, and I have a lot of control. And again, control point doesn't do anything for me because I don't know when I get 10 or 12 of these. If I double click on that, I can change that to black shirt. And I know if I want to go back and adjust something, I can simply click on, there's my gradient, there's my black shirt, and I'm ready to actually make adjustments. Let's continue on and look at, again, some of our other adjustments areas. By the way, when you're done, if I was done with this, I could hit close and I'm back to my regular editing. And if I want to get back to my local adjustments, I just click on that. And I'm going to go over here, right click, and there's a couple of other options. I am going to point out the erase. I probably won't get to this just because it's a little more detailed than we want, but I can, with a brush, paint a certain area. So if I wanted to affect just a certain area, maybe I just wanted to bring down this foreground and make it a little bit darker. Okay, I could go over here to a brush. I could probably do this with a gradient, but I can also do this by just painting with my brush. Now, when you switch to the brush tool, a couple of things happen. First of all, there's our keyboard shortcuts. I'll leave those up for a minute. I might need to close it just so you can see where I'm painting. But I can change the size of my brush. I can change the softness, how hard or how soft it is. I can change its opacity if I want to keep it a little bit more translucent. And by the way, I can change all these afterwards. And I can also change the flow. And flow is when you paint over something multiple times, it'll actually paint a little bit darker. So that's the difference, if you've ever seen, between flow and opacity in any piece of software. Flow is like if you're painting something and you put on another coat and another coat, it affects it more, where opacity is just fixed to where it was. So I have all these brush settings. There are great little keyboard shortcuts. One that I do like is if I want to use the scroll wheel on my mouse, I can make something bigger. On a Mac, I'll hold down the Command key and scroll. That would be the Alt key in Windows. And if I want to make it softer or harder, I could just go ahead and use the, should be the Shift key. And maybe what I'll do is I will zoom in to my image. I can zoom in here if I want, just 1-to-1. And then I can, by the way, if you zoom in and you want to move around your image, just hold down the space bar, you get a little hand, and then you can really see the detail. Okay, I think that's a little bit too zoomed in. We'll go to 50%, and I'm just going to go over here and paint our brush in the area that I want affected. Okay, now once I've done that, I can go ahead and use these. I'm going to go bring this in, bring down the exposure a little bit, and maybe just bring down, my highlights. Okay, so now when I go to this, fill the screen, our eye isn't necessarily drawn as tightly to that area. Okay. So we'll go back here and go to not 1-to-1, we'll go fit the screen. So we fixed this, and remember, when you're editing, you can easily go back and forth. So there I see my correction. I see the shirt is now not necessarily black, it's lighter. and I can start tweaking my image. And as you can see, one of the options, if you need to, is you can erase things and you can always reset. So the key here is simply right-clicking once you're inside this tool, your local adjustments, and you can be very specific how you can fix things. And in 3.2, the nice things that we've done is we've been able to rename them. And the other thing you can do is, for instance, if I wanted to, say, duplicate something. So I'm going to jump to another image here just very quickly. And here's an example of, I'm working with this image, and I've done some control points here where I've softened her skin. Let's go to one with the original where there's no modifications. The only modification to this one would be just what DxO has already done. And I can go in and I can select a tool, and maybe I want to help clear up somebody's skin. So what I can do is I can create this tool. I can use any one of these choices. I would probably use a control point because now it's just going to select the skin in a specific area. Okay, oh, I was in my negative thing, there we go. And now I'm going to click here, there we go. And I've created that mask. I was just in the wrong button there. When in doubt, try again. So now it's just selecting this part of her skin based upon the hue and the luminance and the saturation. And I can go in here, and if I wanted to, I can go down to this bottom one and just say, you know what? I want to soften it a little bit. And by working in the show mask options, I can see what I'm affecting. And maybe what I'll also do is, I think the highlights, she's blown out a little bit, so I'll bring those down. So this is what I'm doing. If I want to toggle a mask off or on, very easy to do. There's a little eyeball to the right, and it's pretty subtle. Let me be a little more aggressive here to bring that down. Bring down my highlights, bring down the exposure. Okay, so now I'm bringing this down to where I want. And what's really great is now if I want to apply this to other areas, I don't necessarily, I could make this bigger and it still is going to base it off this area. If we hit show mask, you can see I'm affecting more of this, but there's a little bit of color tone difference. So I want to apply these same areas to other parts of her face. I can go over here to the control point on the right side and right click on it and say duplicate that. And now I have another mask. It's placed right on top, and I can move that over to a cheek. So that's great. I can also hit Shift D to duplicate the mask. So Shift D for duplicate is the same on Mac and PC. And now drag that over to this part of the face. So now I'm starting to get different areas, but just like we saw before, it doesn't help me looking at this to know control point, control point, control point. I can say right cheek, left cheek, control point, and that's forehead. And as you could see, I can go through and do this throughout the whole image. And the nice thing is I can say, oh, you know what? I brought the cheeks down too much. I want to just work on the left cheek. I'm going to not show my mask. And let's not bring down the luminance as much. Or let's go in and say, oh, you know what? It's a little too red. I'm going to bring down the vibrance on that. So this gives me a lot of control with working with masks, and the fact that I can duplicate them very easily allows me to copy my adjustments and not have to reinvent the wheel. So that's what I want to cover just for the new features with local adjustments. We did learn some other things about the interface. We streamlined the way this looks. We streamlined the interface. If you use the previous version, there was a color overlay showing what the source image was that they were using to fix the new area. Now it's an outline, so it's much easier to see what's going on. So that was huge, and that was one of the things that a lot of people loved what they could do, but they thought, it would be great if I could see what's underneath. And that's where the engineers changed this. So let's jump back over into PhotoLab 3. And we'll go back to that image I was working on earlier. As you can see, everything was saved when I stepped away. By the way, just as a reference, the original image is never modified. When you are working in PhotoLab, it's creating a little sidecar file with all the adjustments that you are applying to it, and then it blends them together for when you do an export. So the great thing is you're never going to mess up your original images, and you're not going to get really large files. These little sidecars are generally in the kilobyte range, and that's really nice. And it also allows you the flexibility to go back and make changes to modify that original image because they are discrete elements. So what I want to work on now is I want to do a little bit of repair. And I have a lot of things I want to repair. You can use this if somebody, if they have a skin issue and you want to remove, a pimple or any of that. If you have things in the background you want to remove, camera spots. So let's take a look at that in play. I'm going to turn off my control point and I'll close this window. And while I'm here, just as an FYI, whenever you make any changes to an image, of course, you can compare it with the original with the button on top. You can also do a side-by-side. That's often very nice to be able to do a side-by-side to see what it was before and after to make sure you like it. But you can also turn on and off individual adjustments, such as if I wanted to turn off all my local adjustments, I can just click on this button right here. Blue is on and gray or no blue is off. So I can work independently. Maybe I want to be able to focus on removing things. And that's exactly what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into repair. So let me close local adjustments. And the repair tool you can get to by clicking on this little, looks like a Band-Aid. There's also one on top, and the interface is a little different with the repair tools. I'm going to hop back over to my presentation, and if I am good here, yeah, so this is on the Mac version. I pointed that you can get to it from the very top, if you notice where the number 1 is. And I'll have the size selectors to the left where you see the number 2. The toggle button is down where the number 3 is. Now, if we go to the Windows version, it's a little different. Again, you get to the button in the same place, but instead of having sliders in the lower left-hand corner, like on the Mac, which we saw here, the sliders are on the top of the interface where you can control size, feathering, and opacity. And then the other area, there's a drop down in Windows where you see the word repair. And if we go back to the Mac version, you'll see there's the word repair next to the word mode. And I'll talk about that. Let's switch back over to the PhotoLab. And when I am in this repair tool, so I'll click on it, there's a drop down here that says repair and clone, and we're going to focus on the repair area. I will explain what the difference is between the two. Repair, when I pick an object, it will automatically look for an area that is a good source, that's neutral. It'll do its best guess. It's not always perfect, but the great thing is we can adjust that, and it will look at basically the texture, the hue, the saturation, and blend that information on top of the things you want to correct or remove. Clone looks again at another area of the image, but makes a direct copy of that. So a lot of times when you use clone, it's great if you need to move something, a tree, or if you have a straight surface here, and I'll maybe try to remove this tree a little bit. We're cloning where you want precisely what's in another part of the image to be in the new location. But most of the time, to fix little problems, the repair is what you want to use. So we'll leave that there. And again, in Windows, it's just you click on the repair and you'll see that it'll drop down to the option of clone. Again, control the size, the softness or hardness of my brush, and again, the opacity of my brush. I'm going to keep this at 100%. I'm going to go in here, zoom in. I'll hold down the space bar, move over, and the first thing we'll get rid of is this parasailer. So I can paint over that. And as soon as I let go, you'll notice I now have these white edges so I can see exactly what's going on. It guessed that this would be a good area to use to take the texture and the hue and try to create a natural blend, which is really nice. It's not a direct copy because it's the repair, it's a natural blend. I really don't see the, if I was really picky, I could see if I could see those, hopefully that shoot's attached, but I'm gonna again paint over this area and it chooses that. If you wanna delete any, you simply select it and hit the backspace button. But if I wanted to, remember the show mask button lets me see these. I can hover over an existing one and then I hover over the little dot and I can say, oh yeah, don't source from there because the sky got too dark, source from over here. And if this one was wrong again, I could move that around. Let's take a look at another area where I might take advantage of that, where it could get a little bit confused. So we have, I didn't want necessarily this information here about the pool. So what I can do is I can paint over this. And I'll try to do it in one fell swoop. Sometimes you have to do separate areas, but I'm gonna cross my fingers here. And when I let go of the mouse, it's gonna analyze it. Oh, it did a pretty good job. Okay, so if I wanted to, let me just zoom out a little bit here. And yeah, I need to zoom out a little bit more so you can see where it came from. And if I needed to move any of these, I can. It's hard to see the white outline in what I picked. I moved it to the pool. So had it picked the pool area, and it's a lot smarter than I am, it would have used that to start fixing this. And you'll see that that didn't necessarily work. Okay, it's not the greatest fix. Let me go back, and I'm going to show you this. I was actually surprised that I could do that with just one fix. So very easy to go around. If there's something that's bothering you, you need to remove it. Maybe you want to remove a reflection, you can do that. Let me show you how the clone tool works. So I'm switching to clone. And again, I paint over my source area. Now, this is not going to work perfectly because I don't know if I have a good area to source from, but let's say I go over to here. Okay, and it actually did a pretty good job. It picked the area that it wanted to pull from. So I could go ahead and say, okay, that lines up and go through and redo it. As a matter of fact, it was smarter than me. It actually fixed this to where the water was pretty accurate. And what's really cool about this is if I wanted to do another clone or repair inside, so maybe I come back here and I go, oh yeah, look, I can see this tree, this little bush again, and that says, oh, that must be a clone. I'm gonna just go over here, hit repair, and remove one of these. And I wanna make that a little bit smaller. And let's see. I'm gonna do that. I let go of my mouse, so we'll just do that as a paint. And in this case, you'll notice it picked an area next to it, so I see the double bar, and that's the beauty of being able to adjust these. So now this is the source, this is the destination, it's trying to do its best guess. I don't know if a repair was the best option for that. I might have done a clone, but I just want you to see you have all of this control. I'm going to delete that and try something even more novel, which is inside of my repair mask. I'm going to actually see if I can repair what I've already cloned. And I'm making my brush smaller. There we go. It chose this tree area over here. I know that was wrong, so I'm going to just choose something really close there. Let it think. And if we turn off our show masks, you can see with time, you can do some really good cleanup. That was our before, that's our after. Obviously not my final or my most professional use of this, but I do want you to see the power. Let's go ahead and zoom out, and you can see how well those two elements work. So that's a big thing with the way the clone and the highlight work. And you can paint things out. And again, with all of these, if I wanted to see what it looked like with just the repairs not done, I can switch that off and everything comes back. So you're completely non-destructive and you can step back. And if I wanted to, I can click on show masks. I can see all of the ones that I did. And then simply, if I need to delete them or move them, select them. I want to show you a really cool trick. I have a lot of sensor spots here, and that's my bad. And sometimes they're really kind of hard to see. You might not see them until you print them. This is a really interesting trick. We have something called Clearview Plus, which I said in a previous part of this webinar, that you can use it to remove haze and fog in an image. I'm going to do it to really pump up contrast. Okay, so you notice if I move it all the way over to the right, all of my really ugly sensor spots are visible. This killed me when I looked at this because it was like, yeah, I changed the lens and just microdust blew in. This is a real challenge with mirrorless cameras, so a photography recommendation is I always bring a sensor cleaner with me, several of them as a matter of fact, whenever I go on a trip. And if I'm shooting at the beach, if I have two camera bodies, one lens on each body. So I want to quickly be able to do repairs to these, not to clones. So I want to make my brush pretty much as small as possible. And now that I can see them, I can just go ahead, click through these. I think the sky's pretty even. I've noticed that the AI in here does a better job of finding the right area than I do. So I'm gonna not worry too much. And I can click on it if I want a dot. I can click and hold my mouse if I want it to be a line. So this is pretty quick. See, I created a line there. I don't want that. Just simply select and hit delete. And go back and do that as a button, 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 button. I think that's good for now. I could probably find a lot more. So I've hopefully fixed my problems. I simply would turn off show masks. That looks really good for cleaning my sensor spots. And now I'm going to go back and either reset or turn off Clearview Plus because I didn't want it to affect my whole image. And I was able to see all of those sensor spots. I had turned off my local adjustments. I can turn those back on. So this is just something to realize is that if something is distracting me that I did a correction to, I can temporarily disable it and then turn it back on, or even turn it off and export one version with something off and one version with something on. I like this. I want this image to pop. I just want to show you how I would do a global adjustment. We did local ones, but I think if I move it up the vibrancy here, it's definitely going to just bring out a lot of this area. So that's how you would do, repairs to an image. And that's some of the powers there. So again, this is the difference between the Mac and the Windows version, just where things are located, but it all works the same. There is the interface. It's be slightly different with where the repair is positioned, but it works exactly the same. You'll notice on the left side, instead of it being blue when it's on, it's white. So nuance of changes, but pretty much the same. Now let's take a look at keywording in PhotoLab. Now, we've improved keyword management. Now, before you could add and delete and rename keywords that are paired to an image, but now users can differentiate between keywords that are tagged to several images. And I'll show you how that works in just a second. But for those of you who haven't used keywording, let me just kind of go over the basics. Let's jump back over to PhotoLab. And here we're looking at the images we were working with before. And if I hover over any of these images, a pop-up will show. And in that pop-up, you'll actually see keywords. You can see that at the bottom of my screen, keywords, and this says beach, model release, and it says yes, and the name of the model, Olivia, that it was taken at a pool, and a resort. So these keywords were actually brought in when I imported these images into my PhotoLab project. And where they took them from was either they were embedded metadata in the images themselves in the TIFF and JPEG files, or in some cases when I brought things in from Lightroom or in some other applications that would have sidecar XMP data, it could read that and apply those keywords to the images so that I can work with them faster and better. So for instance, the cool thing about this is if I wanted to, I could hover over just say this third image, and you can see it pop up. Again, the name of the model I had put there, that it is a model, and that I have a model release. If I go to the next image, which are flowers, the only thing I keyworded was flowers, and I don't need a release for that. So this is very useful when looking through my selection of images in the PhotoLibrary tab. Now, another really cool thing about using keywording is I can search my hard drive for specific images that might already have keywords applied to them. So for instance, if I wanted to find all the images with this model named Olivia, I could type Olivia in the search box in the upper left-hand corner. And let me go ahead and start typing her name. And you'll notice even before I got to the first three letters, I have a drop down. And if you look at this drop down in this case, the first one would be any document or any picture named Olivia. The second option is any folder that would be named Olivia. And the third one with the little key by it is any images that might have that keyword of her name associated with them. And when I click on this, you can see at the bottom, it brought up all these different images on my hard drive where I have images of this person. Now, it keeps the most recent searches. So for instance, I did a search for scuba and it found all the images that I was working on that had the keyword scuba, or any image that actually might have scuba in its keyword metadata. And that's really cool. For instance, if I wanted to, I could select all of these and create, by right-clicking, a specific PhotoLab project from this current selection. So I could click on that, and I'll name it Scuba. And I can click on Create. And there we have in my projects all my scuba images, and I have a project where I could add more images or work on that. As a matter of fact, one of the other options, I'll click back on a recent search that I just did of Olivia. When I right-click on that image, in addition to creating a project from a selection of images, I can add those to an existing PhotoLab project, and that's great for organization. Let's take a look at how keywording works in the Customize tab. I'm going to open up this folder called Miscellaneous Photos. And it's just a variety of photos. As a matter of fact, when you're in the PhotoLibrary, there's a little slider here, and you can move that up and down to see all the images in a folder. I like to keep it at the bottom for right now. And I want to work on this first image, or look at this first image. You'll notice that when I hover over it in the PhotoLibrary, I look at the bottom. Keywords here are Olivia, outside, and red dress. Let's click on that, and we've moved to the Customize tab. You can see that in the upper left-hand corner. And when I hover over any image, I get the same pop-up in this tab. In addition to that, if we look at the metadata part of the interface, I can see there it is, Olivia, outside, and red dress. If I go to the next image and select it, I can see this one has Olivia on it. And let me jump ahead to this image right here. This one has additional metadata. When I brought it in, I had put in Olivia, that it was an outside shot, and there's also a cat in the picture. So I can go through, and any metadata that exists on any of my images or that has an attached XMP file, I can see keywords, and that's great. But what about changing keywords or adding keywords, especially if you're starting from scratch? Well, if I wanted to add a keyword to an image, let me click on this second image here. I have a keyword drop down, and I can type in this case, jean jacket. I hit the Enter key to accept it, and now this metadata is added to this image. And I can go to the next image And if I wanted to, I can add jean jacket. If I just type the word J, or if I type the letter J, it will give me any of the keywords that I've already used or that are available automatically in a drop-down. So I don't have to type the entire word. I'm going to select that and hit enter. So let's compare these two images. I'm going to actually select them both. I'm going to hit the shift key, and now I have both of these selected. And you'll notice that I see jean jacket and I see Olivia, but they're both kind of grayed out. So what I can do at this point is, if I wanted to apply jean jacket to all of my images, I can select them all. So here she has a jean jacket, and I'm going to just hold down the shift key, select all of these. So what PhotoLab is telling me that in these 5 images, there is at least one instance of a cat keyword, jean jacket, her name, as well as the word outside. If I want to apply a keyword to these 5 images, it's really easy. All I have to do is click on the drop down, and you see 3 choices. One of those choices is apply to all. So I'm going to click on that. And what you'll notice now is that the words jean jacket are bolded. And this is a new feature in 3.2. If a keyword is shared amongst several different images, when selected, that keyword will be bolded. And it's really a nice feature to have, because I can very quickly see if, for instance, all of these don't have a keyword for her name, I can simply click on that and apply to all. Now, a cat isn't in all of these, so I'm going to ignore that, but they're all outside. Now, if I look later over here, I have a couple of images where there's, again, a cat. And if I notice when I hover over it, her name is there, but I want to add cat to it. So here's an example where I can select multiple images. I'm going to select the 2 from inside and this one from outside. So those 3 are selected, and you'll notice in the metadata area of the Customize tab, I can see that her name is in all of them. She's not wearing a jean jacket, but there is a cat. So I can click on that and say apply to all. So now the cat keyword is on these 3 images. And this is the great thing about this update. It's really easy to apply existing keywords across multiple images when you haven't done that by bringing it in. Now, I'm going to step back a little bit because I want to show you how easy it is to apply a keyword to multiple images. Let's scroll to some images at the far end of the panel. So I can click on this, and this one doesn't have any keywords on it. And so I'm going to go ahead and apply the keywords to these images. I'm going to select the first one, hold down the shift key. Now all of them are selected. And I'm going to add the keyword of blue jacket. Now, as you see, when I hit B, it comes up with beach and boat, but as soon as I go into blue, it's all brand new, blue jacket, and then I hit enter. PhotoLab applies this keyword to each of these images. So if I select them independently, and we can look at the pop-up, there it is, blue jacket. Now I'm going to apply brick wall to these images. So I'm going to select all of these images. These were all taken outside. As a matter of fact, I'm going to deselect this one. Now I'm going to type in brick wall, but I'm going to misspell it. I'm going to have an extra A there. And I'm going to say OK. And if we notice now, if I look at any of these images, and I'll just click on this very first one here, that there it is, brick wall spelled wrong. And if I click on another image where there's the brick wall, once again, brick wall spelled wrong. All I have to do is select any of these images, choose brick wall, and click on edit. Now I can fix the spelling. I'm just going to remove that A, click edit, closes the window, and now when I go back to another image where there's a brick wall, you can see the spelling is corrected. So PhotoLab is smart enough that if I've typed a keyword wrong, I can easily select it, correct it, and that change will ripple through all of the other images so the spelling is correct on a keyword. Let's scroll back to the first images. I'll select the first one through the fourth one, and as you can see, if that keyword is shared across all 4 of the images, it's bolded. And if I wanted to add a keyword to all those 4 images, I would just type it in. And if I want to take an existing keyword and apply it to all the images, now I probably wouldn't do this with jean jacket because the first one she's wearing a red dress, I would simply say apply to all. And as you can see, this is now bolded. If I do make a mistake, such as I just did by adding jean jacket to this first image, all I need to do is select that image, click on jean jacket, and press delete, and it will remove that keyword from that image. And what's really cool is when I export images from PhotoLab 3, such as a JPEG file or a TIFF file, those keywords will be added into the metadata of those images, allowing me to search for those images by keywords when I'm in the PhotoLibrary tab or with other applications that can search for those keywords.